Welcome to Scaling with Heart, a podcast about finding creative clarity, strategy, and action in leadership and growth, both in business and personal lives. This week, I'm going to dive into what happens when life pushes you off of your path and you decide to chart a better one. I'm sharing what I've learned about leadership, resilience, and staying true to myself in the face of professional and personal uncertainty and transformation. We'll explore real stories that challenged my comfort zones, demanded some strategic pivots, and ultimately have led to a more empowered and intentional growth and a much happier version of me. I want to start with the offer that wasn't. Um, when my job was ending, there were two positions with the company that I thought I wanted to explore. The first one is one that I really wanted. It's something that tapped into all of the skills I had been using over the course of my career. It allowed me to use the complexity and the diversity of those skill sets while also challenging me to still grow. And that really excited me. So I applied for that position. And while I was waiting to hear back from that and see if I would secure an interview or not, somebody came to me and said, "We really want you for this other job." And the other job was not a bad job, but it just wasn't something I was excited about. It took all of those years and that entire career worth of skills and put me in a box. And that box, to me anyway, would not have a lot of growth trajectory in it. And it kind of was one of my least favorite parts of the job I was already doing. And so it just wasn't very exciting to go for that second job. But I didn't thumb my nose. I definitely wanted to interview for it and learn more about it because maybe I didn't know everything that job had to offer. So in the process of waiting for an offer for the second job, I got an interview for the first job. That was such a strange interview. I had done all of my research I knew the company and I did my research on who was interviewing me and questions that I might be asked for that role and the description of the role. I had done all of the right things and all of the prep work to be able to speak to my experience and how it aligned with that role. But when I got in the interview, the interviewer would ask me questions like, "If you could change one thing, what would you change?" Well, that's a great question. But in what context am I changing things? Am I changing things for this specific role? Am I changing things on a personal level, a business level? If it's on a business level, are we talking about local team level? Are we talking about regional level? Are we talking about corporate level? What level of change are we looking at? And what kind of authority do I have in the change, or am I just creating a wish list? To which he responded, "Well, that's a good question. I don't know." And it left me wondering if the person interviewing me didn't know what he wanted out of the answer. He didn't know what he wanted out of the question. So how am I supposed to answer in a way that is going to even remotely align us? There was no clarity at all in that area. And then the other questions that he would ask, and I don't even remember how I answered that question, but we got past that question and moved on. And every other question he asked while I was interviewing for the one role in operations that I really wanted, every other question he asked was very heavily leaning toward the coordinator role that some other people had said, "Oh, we really want you on the team in this role. We really want you on the team in this role." And everybody was saying, "You should go for this coordinator role. You should do this coordinator role. You'd be really good at this coordinator role." But what everybody wasn't considering is that that coordinator role is the one that put me in a box, and I didn't want to be in a box. I wanted to blow up the box and grow and learn and evolve and enhance and extend my skill sets. And but all of his questions were all about that role. So even going through the interview for the operations role, I knew that he wasn't really interviewing me for that role. He was interviewing me for the coordinator role. So he walked into that interview, it felt like, with a pretty heavy bias of where I belonged. And nothing I said was going to break that mindset. So he, fast forward, he offered that role to someone else. And I was upset. I'm not going to lie. It kind of irritated me. But I was also irritated by the entire interview process and just everything that kind of went around it. It was just very frustrating. And so then he came back and said, I didn't hire you for that role, but I want you to take this coordinator position. I think you'd be really good in that position. And it all was very black and white. And they didn't want somebody, I don't know what they didn't want, but it was very clear to me that for the coordinator role, they wanted somebody that they didn't have to train, that were already up to speed, and we didn't have to worry about onboarding or doing any of the stuff that's going to complicate things. They wanted me where it was safe because I could hit the ground running very quickly. And I could have hit the ground running quickly, but again, there was just nothing exciting about that job. So I waited until I got the official offer in writing, and I read the offer, and it was a fair offer. It was nothing, there was nothing about it that excited me though. And I had some lengthy conversations with my husband. I journaled. I talked to some close friends of mine and mentors about the offer. And do I want to take this offer because it is a job, it is a paycheck? Or is it time for me to cut the ties, move on, and go elsewhere? And ultimately, I decided it was time to cut the ties, move on, go elsewhere, and do something completely different. And at first, that was terrifying. It was so scary. I mean, it really felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff and just ready to dive off of that cliff. And there was no parachute, and there was no net, and there was nothing soft to catch me. It was just rocky terrain at the bottom, and it was going to be a hard landing. But it was just something that I felt like I had to do. I had to take that leap and that risk. And I've never been more grateful that I did it, because in the time since, I have grown so much as a person and a business professional and a leader. I have really, really gotten a hold of who I am and what I want, and how I need to get that. And that clarity is power. And it's so scary to follow your gut, but it's something that is so important. And when you show up following every instinct inside of you that is screaming not to do something, or every instinct is screaming to do it, it's so important to have the clarity of mind and heart to be able to listen to that instinct and know which way to go with it. And in finding that clarity, I now know what I want in my next position and next job. I now know what I'm looking for, to know how I can best align with the company, and the company can best align with what I want. And that's something that too many people don't get out of life. So if you have the opportunity, even if you're currently employed, if you have the opportunity to just really stop and analyze what it is you're doing. And are you doing that because it's something that you are passionate about and love? Or are you doing it because it's a paycheck and you need a paycheck? And there's nothing wrong with working because you need a paycheck. But that's not the be all end all. And we have to be able to we deserve to find a middle ground between making ends meet and even getting ahead in life with our financial goals and excelling in our financial and personal goals, but also building our professional goals and achieving those things. We deserve to find some harmony between the two. And that's where I've spent the last year, is looking for that harmony, that balance, and the clarity. So when I decided to decline the offer and wrote out the rest of my job, knowing that on June the 28th, I was not going to be employed anymore. Beginning first thing, June 29th, 2024, I was going to be out of a job. But I decided it was time and I needed to take the time for me. And so I did. I took a week or two and, just read books and played with my horses and played with the dogs and cleaned the house and vegged out and watched TV and just did absolutely nothing. I didn't set foot in my office for a week or two. I didn't look at the computer screen or an email or anything. I just took the full week and did nothing that was work related or in any way taxed my brain. It was amazing. And I found in that first week or two where I did nothing, I just found such a quiet pace. And I decided then and there that whatever I do next, there are things I'm going to do and change to maintain that pace. And some of the things I started doing are journaling. I do yoga almost daily. And I just take time to enjoy my house, my property, my horses, my husband. We just enjoy. And so that was the first thing I did. And the first commitment I made was to find those quiet moments, even if they're fleeting. The second thing I did, and I had started this while I was still employed, but I went ahead and finished earning my PMP, my Project Management Professional Certification from the Project Management Institute. This was an intense process where I had to first prove that I had project management experience that spanned more than 5 years. And so I had to go back in time through all of my professional experience, and I had to write up all of these project management plans of all the projects and programs that I ever managed. And, how long did they take? And then I had to find people that I had worked with on the different projects. For every project I submitted, I had to have a different person back up my work on that project. And they had to write a recommendation to the Project Management Institute saying, yes, I do solemnly swear Nikki really did work on this project and she really did accomplish these things. And so I had to chase all of that down. And then there was the 35-hour project management course that I had to take. And then came the studying for the certification test. And I heard so many horror stories about how difficult and complicated the test is, and it's so hard. I was terrified. I just thought for sure I was never going to pass it. I would take practice test after practice test after practice test, and I just could not pass a practice test to save my life. I just knew I was going to bomb this test. It was going to be terrible. But for a good long while, if I was cleaning stalls or working with the horses or doing something on the property, mowing the yard, I had my earbuds in and I had a project management PMP certification playlist on YouTube or something going in my ears all the time. If I was working around the house, I had my earbuds in. In my office, I had all of my walls plastered with those big 3M flip chart post-it charts. I had my walls plastered with those charts with all of the different acronyms and KPIs and the different formulas and things like that you have to remember and know for the test. My walls were plastered with it. And every morning I would walk out here and I would read every single one. And I had a little stair stepper exercise machine in my office, and I would once a day get on the stair stepper machine for about 5 minutes. And while I was on the stair stepper machine, I would be reading and just read them. And it was just over and over and over, just immersing myself in the data and the information of the PMP certification test and the study materials. And finally, I was just like, you know what? I just have to bite the bullet and I just have to take this test. I can't study anymore. I either know it or I don't know it. So I bit the bullet and I took the test and I passed above target in all of the areas, which honestly I didn't expect. But I did it. And doing that just taught me that, I have the capacity to accomplish whatever I decide to accomplish. And the lessons that I learned in that PMP certification process about, leadership, and that project managers, the key to project management is all about removing the obstacles from the teams, kind of being the gate holder, and the buck stops here and all of the drama stops here. And I've got to protect my team from all of the distractions so they can do their best work. And that is what I did for years. And at the same time, while doing that, I have to also be able to align all stakeholders on a single mission, whether they want to do it or not. All of the stakeholders, anybody involved, needs to be in alignment on what we're doing and how we're doing it, but most importantly, why we're doing it. And that alignment was something I had been doing for years. I mean, in my career, I had many moons ago, our corporate headquarters came out and said, we're going to roll out this print training initiative, and every single store location has to have a minimum of one person trained on the print. So my office designated me as the go-to trainer. I went out to San Diego, or actually technically it was Cal Poly. I went out to Cal Poly and attended a training session to be trained as the trainer on this program. I then had to come back and get 72 business owners aligned on this training and why we were doing it. And they were not excited about it. There was a lot of fear going into it. And I had to overcome their fears, and I had to learn to speak to them. And also at the beginning, I was a terrible trainer. I was, you're not figuring it out, just get out of the way and I'll do it because I can do it faster kind of person. And so I had to learn through that process of stepping back and sometimes biting my tongue, and sometimes legit wrapping my arms behind my back and clasping my hands behind my back so I didn't try to take control. I had to learn to give up the control and let other people do it, and do it at their pace and make their mistakes. And that was so painful for me. But by the time we had everybody trained, and we did accomplish a 100% compliance rate with that requirement, and maintained compliance to a degree of 97% compliance and better for the next decade plus. But that lesson taught me how to give other people space to explore, and how to focus on what they needed and how it was going to work for them. Because if I just approached it with, I have to do this training and you have to let me do this training, we were never going to accomplish anything. So I had to, one by one, every single case, had to look at it and say, okay, what do you need out of this training? And this is how I can deliver that. And what does this person need? And this is how I can deliver that. And I was constantly changing the training approach. And so in addition to learning how to give up control, I learned how to adapt to the immediacy of the needs of the person. And these are skills that can't be taught in a book. You can't read a book and just learn how to do it. And you can't go to college and go, oh, yep, I know how to do it. It's something that you have to learn in the trenches. And those were some of the hard lessons I learned in that. Another heavy project that I managed that taught me some heavy strategy was when we needed to convert from a Java POS point of sale system to a Microsoft Dynamics 365 based point of sale system. For many, many years, all of our partner sites, franchise locations had had the opportunity and the flexibility within their Java POS system to make all kinds of customizations. They could reorganize all of their buttons, and they could change their button colors, and they could rename their buttons, and they could just make up their own buttons. And they had all of this, they just had so much autonomy and flexibility to make their system what they wanted it, that no two POS systems across our network, it seemed, were the same. So we needed to shift. At the time, we had 112 stores that needed to do it, but we had to shift to a system where everything had to be the same. And all of the systems had to use the same data. They could activate the same SKUs or deactivate SKUs by choice, some of them, but all of that customization that existed in the Java POS was going away. Well, before we could move to the new system, we had to clean up those old legacy data masses in all of the different stores. And that meant that every store needed to download their existing prices and their existing SKUs. And we had to find out which product identification number, the SKU number, was going to match. They're using this ID number for a product, but in the new system, they're going to have to shift to this product number. And so we had to match up those product numbers and take their old data and bump it up against the new, what was going to be allowed, and do all of that. And we had to update their pricing, and new technology had to be ordered. New vendor accounts had to be signed, and old vendor accounts had to be canceled. And there was all this stuff that had to happen, all of these little bitty pieces that needed to fall in place. And none of them were small and simple. And we had to train everybody on the new system, which is hard to do when you don't have a system to play with, and yet we need to train on it. And so these were all pretty major challenges. And we had to do it, I had to do it times 112 in our local area. And that's 112 different personality types of people that I'm dealing with, and 112 different platforms of technology and setups and systems. So it was a lot of stuff to navigate and streamline and hone in on. And again, going back to those lessons I learned in the print training, learning how to adapt to each individual's needs and aligning everyone on the same mission. And we had a hard cutoff date that we had to get everybody converted on that MPOS system, the POS system. We had to get everybody converted by a certain date, or our headquarters was going to shut off the Java POS system. And if you weren't converted, you weren't going to be able to do business. So we really had to push, and it was not easy. We did make the deadline. The last store converted on the last night, but we did get everybody converted by the deadline. And so many people, because of that cleanup of data, so many of our franchisees who had never raised their prices or changed their prices in 5-10 years, so many of our people, for the first time in ever, actually looked at their prices and evaluated what they were charging and just made small subtle tweaks in their prices. But as soon as they did that and converted to the new system, they saw more than a 20% increase in their profitability. And it was just because we took the time to go one-on-one and look at every single product that they offered in the store and every single service, and adjust the pricing one at a time for every store, for everybody in our network. And we couldn't have done that without a heavy strategy in place. And that was where I came in. I had to build the strategy, and then I worked with everybody and built everybody through it. And it was so important for both of those initiatives, the print training and the technology shift. Those were two of the biggest challenges that we faced. We faced a lot, but those were two huge ones that were very time consuming and covered a long period of time. And they would not have been successful if I had not focused on the people first. I couldn't just create a strategy sitting here in my office and then go out and say, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. You're on deck first. I had to take the people into mind. And that is just one of the biggest things about leadership and scaling a business and scaling growth across leadership and business that I have learned over the course of my career. And it so closely mirrors our personal life and our personal missions and dreams and goals. Like my desire to go back to school, which was the third big change I made when my job ended. I decided, you know what, it's time. I'm going to take another leap, and I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to get my bachelor's degree. And I earned, in 11 months, I completed 3.5 years of coursework while graduating summa cum laude with an invitation into the Sigma Beta Delta International Honor Society, which is for business majors, business management, and administration managers. And all of those lessons that I learned over the years on strategy and people first and time management and setting a plan and taking action on the plan, all of those lessons that I learned on initiatives like the print training and the POS conversion all played into my success and my ability to complete the 3.5 years of coursework in 11 months for my college degree. I had to get really good at time blocking my calendar. And if it was important to me, it was on my calendar. And if you weren't on my calendar, it didn't get done. And so those are just some of the ways that work lessons and life lessons, combine and cross each other over. And while I was in school and doing all of the classes, just like through the project management certification, I learned so much about myself as a person. I dug deeper through the coursework, we dug deeper into leadership and organizational behavior and what makes people tick and what do people look for when they go to a company to work for a company. And when you're a leader and you're working with a team, or you're on a team and you're working with a leader, how does that dynamic work? How does the leader team member dynamic work? And are we just automatically leaders because somebody says we are, or do we have to earn that? I believe we have to earn it. And we're only a leader when people agree to follow us. Just like if we don't agree to follow somebody who says they're a leader, then they're not a leader, right? Like they have to earn our respect just like we have to earn everybody else's. And going through the process of what makes people tick and what makes a successful leader, I learned so much about myself and what I had done. And it put a new light on, past work experience, like going back to the print training initiative that we did in the beginning. I was a terrible idea for a trainer. And I told my boss so. She's like, you're going to be the trainer. I said, I am the worst. I don't have the patience to let people do it and fumble through it. I just want to shove them out of the way and get in there and do it. And her response to that was, well, it's time to learn. And you're going to be our trainer. So our trainer I became. And I did learn. And, for the first few trainings, I really did sit with my arms crossed behind my back so that I couldn't touch. And I stood behind them and kind of looked over their shoulder at their computer screen and said, okay, now go up. And, and I had to find ways, I had to practice directing people verbally instead of leaning in and pointing. I had to give them the opportunity to find it themselves. And it's a painful growth experience, but it was so invaluable. And it just really played into all of the years and all of the success that I have found in how to build a strategy and how to approach things and how to look at the people side of things first. And it's great to hustle and have the grit and do the grind and really just dive in and dig deep, but we can't forget how what we're doing aligns with the other people that are involved or with our own goals. And for me, going back to school, I was hustling, but I had a purpose. And I had a team, and my support system was all in line. They were all in alignment with my mission and what I wanted to do. And I had, my family here on the property, they were kicking in and taking extra chores so I could be out here. And I skipped family dinners and family get-togethers, and I skipped going to movies and hanging out with my sisters and nieces and nephews, and I skipped that stuff for the sake of getting my degree in a quick amount of time because it was important to me. And I communicated that why that was important to them up front, so hopefully people wouldn't be upset when I did reject their invitations. Uh, and it was hard. And I can't say that all of my relationships came out of it the same as I went into it. The relationships definitely changed over the year, but not always for the worst. I definitely did not come out of it for the worst. I came out of it so much stronger and so much more sure of who I am and what I want, and that persistence and the self-worth that you can find in yourself, and even the new community that you can find when you're going through the process of something like a school degree is huge. And all of that played in. And while I was doing the PMP certification and while I was earning my bachelor's degree, all of these things were stacking on top of each other. I was also joining networking groups to learn about the job market, because the job market is not what it was now. Today, it is not what it was when I was on the job hunt the last time. And I had to learn. It's a completely different animal these days. And the people in the job hunt are different these days. And I had to find my community and some place that I could go and where the people, encourage you and build each other up and help each other along the way and act as resources to one another. And finding that network, that community helps maintain your self-worth while you're on the job hunt. So if you're on the job hunt now or in the future, it's it's a terrifying place. And the longer the job hunt goes on and the longer you go without a job, the more people I talk to, I hear people talk about how they're not sure, oh, I've been out of a job for 2 years and I'm not sure when I find a job. I don't know if I still remember how to do it. I think I do, but I don't know. And so they start to doubt themselves. And every interview that results in a rejection for that job, even if it's not personal, it feels deeply personal. And having clarity in who we are as people, as individuals, gives us the strength and helps us overcome those issues. And if I had not gone to school and gotten my degree and learned everything I learned, one, about myself through the process, but two, upskilling. I was constantly upskilling and I still am upskilling every day, learning new things and connecting with new people and having informational interviews and learning about different industries. It is a constant growth trajectory that I have been on. And that mindset and that desire to be on a constant growth trajectory really helps combat things like imposter syndrome and extensive timelines of job hunts, and self-doubt. And And I really have a strong idea now of who I want to be when I step into my next role. And it's it's not going to be a job just for the sake of a paycheck. If I wanted a job just for the sake of a paycheck, well, I mean, those are on every street corner. So it's not about just any job that'll pay me to work. It's about the right job where I align with them and they align with me. And that's what I need and that's what I want. And going through all the processes and the self reflection to find that clarity is also huge. And again, the ways I did that, I built a network of people who are outside of my family and have built new friendships. And I've joined an accountability group and I have a mentor who is, kind of pushing me to get out of my comfort zone. This podcast is one example of that. Sitting and talking about yourself on camera is not the easiest thing in the world to do. It just takes repetition and getting used to it. And these are things that people can, the right mentor can help guide you and give you direction on, this would look good for you, this would work well for you, I think, or whatever. And somebody else seeing value in what you have to share before you see it in yourself is sometimes so huge. And through following that mentor's advice and putting myself out there, I have had invitations to speak for different groups. And I've had people coming to me through my LinkedIn profile to talk about possible job opportunities that I never would have expected. I mean, these are things that I did not know these things existed and they would never have hit my radar, but they're coming to me saying, "Hey, we saw your profile," or, "I saw you post about this particular topic and that really resonated with me." And it's not always a topic I would have thought would have resonated, but different things are hitting different people different ways and they're coming to me. And and all of that is a product of putting myself out there and building a bigger network you know, and putting myself out there and chatting with people on LinkedIn and going to networking events and meeting new people. My circle of champions has gotten larger, and in the beginning it was just my family, but it's grown exponentially. And not only has it grown, but some of my largest champions, my loudest champions, are not even in my family. I have some pretty loud ones in my family. Uh, but some of the loudest ones are not even in my family. They are beyond the family. And they're the ones that are pushing me to do new things and try different things. And when you're thinking about these things, Nikki, did you think about, and they'll give me a list of other things that just really sends me back into the quiet moments that I find when I'm sitting on my back porch watching the sunset or doing yoga or just sitting on the mat, just breathing. All of these questions and challenges come to me in these times, and it's just time to reflect on me. And in that clarity and in the clarity that comes from all of that, self-doubt fades and the energy to keep going when things are hard grows. And we need that. We need the energy to push through, and we need our self-doubt to get quiet so that our positive self-speech can get louder. And you just never know who's watching and what you're going to say and how it's going to land and how your name is going to get into a room. And you never know who's going to pop into a DM in your LinkedIn or any other social media profile or whatever. You never know who's going to pop into your inbox with a message that says, "Hey, we saw you and we really want to talk to you about this." So showing up authentically can pay dividends that you never would have expected. And to show up authentically, we have to know who we are. And that's where I've been, is trying to figure out who I am, where I'm going, what I need. I've got a solid idea because of all the work that I've done. It's not easy. It takes time and patience and intentional effort. It takes continuous learning. It also takes an ability and a willingness to open yourself up and ask other people how they see you. And when you do that, and when you start taking in other people's information and feedback, you can go from being frantic day-to-day worker just trying to survive the hustle of the job to focused on who you are and how who you are aligns with your mission in life and how your life mission aligns with your work mission. When you can focus in on that, you can stop chasing checklists and live with clarity. And when you learn to stop chasing checklists and live with clarity, you can have moments like I experienced yesterday. We had some family over for my husband's birthday, and we're a large family. We are not quiet. And so we're all in the house. We're all shoved into the house. And, I went over and I sat down next to my mom. She was at the dining table by herself. And I went over and I said, "Hey, Mom, what's up?" And she says, "I'm just sitting here enjoying the peace." I said, "You think this is peaceful?" She says, "I think the atmosphere in your house is peaceful and relaxing." And that, even in the midst of a loud, chaotic family and 10 different conversations going on at the same time, I think the comment that my house atmosphere, my home atmosphere is peaceful, and my mom can come over here and sit down and amongst the crazy enjoy what she sees as peace and just let her shoulders drop a little bit and escape the chaotic turmoil that is her life at home right now. That is huge. And it is because my husband and I both over the year have put such a focus on our goals and our missions personally and individually and as a couple, and what we want and where we need to go and how we're going to get there. We talk about it a lot, and it's paid off. And the fact that my mom could come over and say that just meant so much to me. So I really wish you the very, very best in finding a way to calm the frantic, find the focus, stop chasing your checklists, and tune in and live with clarity. So never stop chasing clarity, and let's connect. I would love to hear your story.